Good morning to our speakers and good afternoon to our audience. It is our pleasure to warmly welcome you to today's workshop on UNESCO's career opportunities, hosted by the UAE National Commission for Education, Culture and Science with the wonderful support of UNESCO. My name is Selma Al-Darmaki. I am the Secretary General of the UAE National Commission and will be moderating today's workshop, where we will learn about UNESCO's careers and its young professionals program known as the YPP in short. We believe that for Emiratis to be able to achieve their aspirations of working at UNESCO, that they should know and understand the options and requirements for UNESCO careers and plan early and long-term to meet the credentials and requirements for those careers. We are delighted to introduce the speakers joining us today, representing UNESCO's Human Resources Management team. First, Mrs. Anique Grissar, Chief of Staffing and Recruitment, Ms. Emma Boate, Human Resources Officer, Ms. Olivia Haludilo, Associate Human Resources Officer, and Ms. Jennifer Blinker, Associate Human Resources Officer. There will be two parts to this workshop. Firstly, we will begin with a presentation covering UNESCO's programs, career paths, requirements, and the application process. And secondly, we will move on to a question and answer segment. For the Q&A segment, please share any questions you may have in the YouTube chat throughout today's session, and they will be addressed after the presentation. And kindly note that if you have any questions after today's session or questions that have not been answered, our team at the UAE National Commission can also be reached by email. Dear Ms. Anique, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salma, and thank you to the National Commission for this wonderful organization of this very important event. For us, it's an honor and a pleasure to speak to an audience of young, interested UAE candidates, as we are very, very interested in attracting more qualified UAE candidates into UNESCO. So thank you for everything that was organized. And without further ado, I will start the presentation. And as you have mentioned, there will be an extensive session of questions and answer after the presentation. The agenda you have already mentioned, so I will briefly skip it. UNESCO in brief. Now, UNESCO is an organization of the UN system. I think it's really important to recall this. You can see from this slide, there are many agencies in the UN system, and UNESCO is one of its specialized agencies, like WHO, like the FAO. UNESCO is one of the specialized agencies specialized in culture, science, education, communication, and social science. It's part of the UN system. Of course, the UN Secretariat, the biggest organization of the UN system, with its headquarters in New York. UNESCO has its headquarters in Paris. It's the only agency with headquarters in Paris. The others are either in New York or in Geneva, one of them in Nairobi as well, and others in Vienna. UNESCO is an old organization, but you'll see it's an older organization, but it's a very, very modern organization to its programs. It has 195 member states, so many, many member states. And it not only has an headquarters in Paris, but also it has 53 field offices and 9 Category 1 institutes. Our current Director General is Mrs. Audrey Azoulay from France. Now, as I mentioned, UNESCO is part of the UN system, and you all have heard, I'm sure, about the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. They were adopted by the General Assembly, and there is a huge program. All agencies are collectively working towards attaining these goals. And UNESCO, in this context, is one of the agencies which has a contribution in many of the SDGs, in the one for education, in the one for culture, in the one for sciences, in the one for natural sciences, for social and human science, and for communication and information. So huge, huge impact and contribution for the SDG. Now, UNESCO is not building schools, for example, but UNESCO is contributing to capacity building for the school systems, for the curriculum vitae. That maybe differentiates us from agencies which are really field-based, like, for example, UNICEF, like UNHCR. UNESCO is more into the capacity building, into the normative area, in the advisory capacity, which makes it a specialized agency. Though it provides advice, it strengthens international and regional and national capacity, and it serves as a laboratory of ideas. Now, UNESCO staff is, as you see, about 2,000 staff. So those are the staff members, but we have many contractors as well, over 2,000. We are in mainly at headquarters, but also a very big size of the staff is in the field and in the Category 1 institutes. In terms of gender parity, we are doing well in terms of gender parity, I must say. Global presence, as I mentioned, offices in many areas of the world, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Eastern Europe, but also in your region. Now, UNESCO has a mandate which is very interesting and very diverse. You have 5 areas of UNESCO work, of UNESCO focus. The first one is education. And this shows to you the 5, I would say, main priorities for education. That includes teacher training, women and girls in education. I'm sure you have heard of that. Huge program. Then we have the science program. Now, water, which is one of the key challenges of those years, but the year come, is one of our focus area. But so is man and biosphere. And if my memory is correct, you have at least 2 biosphere reserves, I think, in the UAE. So very important program. And oceans as well. Oceans with the tsunami warning systems. And science technology, capacity building, policy advice. We have the social human science, maybe not as well known yet, but we have 2 huge programs, youth, and this is the Ministry of Culture and Youth. So this is I'm sure you have heard about the youth program in the UAE, and also bioethics, very important, and sports, big agenda in sports. Culture, I'm sure you have heard of it, and I think there is at least one site in the UAE, protection of World Heritage. We have the huge convention starting now, the World Heritage Committee starting very soon in China. So protection of World Heritage is one of the biggest, maybe the most visible, one of the most visible focus and program of UNESCO. But not just that, we are also promoting cultural diversity and preventing illicit trafficking. Communication and information, press freedom, protection of journalists, memory of the world, many very, very important documents which are conserved and maintained in this program. So those are the 5 areas. As you can see, it's very diversified. But there's a lot of interconnectivity between the different programs. And I think this is one of the richness of UNESCO. So who are we looking for? Well, essentially, we are looking for the national civil servants who are ready to work for the UN more globally and for UNESCO more specifically. And we have, of course, it's important for us to have core values. The core values are the commitment to the organization and to the UN in general. Integrity, respect for diversity, professionalism. Those are the 4 core values for UNESCO International Civil Servant. And you will see those are fairly common across the UN system. Then we have also the core competencies. Those are the key attributes that need to be displayed by international civil servants in UNESCO. Again, we are sharing these competencies with other UN agencies. And as you can read there, there's teamwork. I'm just pinpointing a few. Innovation, I'm sure, innovation is part of your DNA. Results focus, also very important. And finally, the managerial competencies, for those who aspire into a management position, and that's about people management, but also resource management. So those are our key values and competencies. Now, in terms of profiles, we are looking for program specialists, program managers in the 5 areas which I mentioned to you, which is culture, education, natural science, communication, and social science. So those are the areas where we're looking for program staff, program people. What does it mean? It means individuals who are able to manage a program, to develop a program, to manage, to fundraise. So this is what we're looking at. Of course, at varying degrees of responsibility. One starts, in the junior grade, and then we move to the ranks. But we are also looking for support, what we call the corporate sectors, corporate bureaus. And those are human resources, administration, law, legal. We have legal, lots of legal work here, fundraising, IT. Those are all these support functions which are indispensable to good implementation of the program. Now, in the UN, we basically are sharing the same rules, the same conditions of service with the UN system. We are one UN family. This is called the UN Common System. So we have 4 big categories. Director categories, those are the senior management. Then we have the international professional staff. This is what we're talking about today, international professional staff. Then we have the national officers. Those are national, locally recruited professional staff. That's a very interesting category too. I don't think we have yet data in the area, but this is a very, very important category. And finally, the general service staff, who are our assistants. Those are a key part of our workforce. So what are the standard requirements to aspire for a professional or director position? Well, we have basic requirements, which are an advanced university degree, a master or equivalent, in one of the area, but it can be related area. What's important is the advanced university degree. And then in terms of the work experience, well, we have, of course, varying degree of requirements according to the grade of the position. It starts from less than 2 years for a P1, P2 position. You will see that for YPP, there is no need for work experience, but of course it's an asset if you have some. And then P3 is the middle level. P3 is the how can I say, it's the working the program special working level, the P3 work job. And then P4 that's more in terms of the middle management, while P5 is it's starting to get in the management ranks. So this is how we are organized throughout the UN system. It's the same in the same categories, the same grade. Now I will maybe quickly comment, because it's and Jennifer can talk about it later. We not only have contracts, fixed-term contracts and career appointments, but we also have talent programs. We have other talent programs. Now the YPP, I will talk about it later on. But we have also something that is really important, which is the junior professional officers. Junior professional officers are junior professionals which are funded by the donor countries. We have JPOs from Saudi Arabia, for example. So these are, and from a diversified pool of donors, and they come for two years, possibly 3, to associate program specialist work. So this is one of our talent program, and it's also a very good way of building experience and later apply to the UN in general position. We have traineeships which may be also sponsored by donor countries, and who come for up to a year, even a bit longer sometimes, and they are assigned to programs or to sections. We have a few in HRM, for example, and they also are building experience. And all of that experience helps to apply for job later on. We have secondments, loans. We have also UNVs, which is a United Nations volunteer program. Those are not really volunteers. In fact, they get a stipend. But again, this is a UN-wide program, which is very interesting. And finally, we have UNESCO volunteer. We accept volunteer. They can be even online volunteer who bring us special expertise for a program or even for a service on a voluntary basis, of course. So those are talent programs. Now, in terms of salary and benefits, as I mentioned, UNESCO applies the UN Common System of Salaries and Benefits. It is basically competitive across the UN. It's a base salary, and of course there is a post-adjustment, so a percentage of the salary in addition to compensate for the conditions of living, for the cost of living in the country. There are annually family allowances, etc. So it's a competitive salary and benefits package that the UN offer, and a very interesting pension plan as well. I will now pass over to Olivia for the description of the recruitment process. I'll come back to explain the YPP. Olivia, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Annika, and good afternoon and good morning, everybody. So I'll be speaking about the recruitment processes and the various steps that we have at UNESCO. For some reason, I'm unable to click the next slide, Annik.
Okay, I'll do it for you then.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so as you can see on the screen, we've got different steps in the recruitment process at UNESCO. Of course, this involves the searching of the job openings, where you search for a job opening at UNESCO on our dedicated career website. You, of course, then move on to creating your own profile and preparing an application. You will submit this application, and once we receive this application, we do what we call an eligibility review, where we actually evaluate these applications and see if they actually qualify or they match the skills and the qualifications that we are looking for. And once this is done, of course, the shortlist is then determined by the hiring managers, and we move on to the assessment exercise, which usually are written tests. And we move on to the competency-based interview, the selection notification, and at the end of it all, you join the UN. So this process takes about 3 to 6 months, depending on of course, on how fast it goes, because this could be determined also by the needs, by the type of contract, and etc. So we will then move just to speak more into detail about each step of the recruitment. So maybe next slide, Annik. So we'll start with the application process. As I stated, UNESCO has a dedicated careers website for job openings, which is careers.unesco.org. But however, before you just apply for any vacancy, it's really important to review the vacancy notice, understand it, and consider the following. Why am I interested in this job? Do I meet the education requirements? Do I have relevant experience for this job? Do I have the needed or required skill set? And how can I contribute the work to the work of UNESCO? So these are very important, so that you don't just find yourself applying for the sake of applying, but you're actually matching your experience, your skills, your education to the relevant posts. On to the next one. Oh, sorry, Anik. Okay. Yes, the applications do's and don'ts. As I said, it's really important to be specific and tailor-make each application to highlight the match between you, the match between your education, your experience to the job. And also, you really need to make most of your experience focus on what you've accomplished using measurables, such as, oh, I have 5 years of experience and this position is using 2, or I have this much experience in management, or this is the level of language that I speak. So it's really, really important to make most of your experience. This is not a time to be humble. Really put it out there that you really, really are the perfect match for this job. And be concise, address the job's needs in clearly written phrases, and indicate all your previous experience, including internships, including volunteer work, especially also unpaid work. And again, indicate your level of language skills. And always remember in the recruitment tool to always tick yes for the completion of a degree, because if you do not, the recruitment tool will then automatically disqualify you, thinking you do not have the necessary education for that post. So always click yes for the completion of the degree. And please double check the accuracy of your email address and contact details, including the phone numbers, because we would need to get back to you. And if you have misspelled your contact details or your emails, we will be unable to do so. Moving on to the next, once we've accepted the applications and we've reviewed, we will move on to the written tests and assessments, which are not necessarily mandatory, but in case this happens, these tests are usually technical in nature, and they involve writing an essay, an email, or a letter or a report on a relevant topic or technical topic related to the competencies of the job. It could also, include perhaps proofreading a document or reviewing some, maybe a budget or a document of, at UN level, and being asked to summarize it. It could really just vary from the needs, from one post to another. And so during this time, your common sense, your comprehension, and writing communications are tested. And these tests usually take between 60 to 120 minutes. And so it just really depends. Sometimes it's less than that, but usually, the most you'll get is perhaps 2 hours to finish this test. And just some tips for this test: it's really, really important for you to read the instructions and the materials correctly, so that you understand the assignment and understand what is being asked of you. You can use a combination of headings, bullet points, and writing styles to add emphasis. And if you are using acronyms, please only do so after you explain them. So you need to prepare this test as if you're writing it, to somebody who doesn't have any knowledge of the subject matter, to a 10-year-old, so that it could be as clear and as simple as possible. So use only acronyms once you have explained them. Use correct spelling and grammar, and also submit your time within the stipulated time period. So if they say 2 hours, within that 2 hours, please send back your work, just to avoid being disqualified. If you take too long, you might end up being disqualified from the process, and that's the last thing that you would need. Moving on to the competency-based interviews. So what is a competency-based interview? These are also known as behavioral interviews, and they feature questions designed to gauge your ability to handle specific job situations based on past performance. And at UNESCO, we really structure our answers using the context, the action and results, and also lessons learned. So basically, you'll be asked to describe something from your past experience. For instance, examples: tell us about a time you worked as part of a team, or tell us about a time you worked as part of a, in an environment with people from different backgrounds, or tell us about the time you had to meet a very tight deadline and things like that. And when you are giving your answers, it's very important to have them structured in a way that you give the context or the situation of that story that you're telling, the action that you took, and also the result. And you could also learn and add your lessons learned. So context, action, the results, and oh, I learned this about myself, or I learned that perhaps next time I'll handle things differently, or so it's always important to also bring in that element of lessons learned. And maybe just to, of course, move on to the preparation of the interviews. Again, it's very important to do your homework. These competitions are really, really, tough. You are competing with the best of the best in the world here. So ensure that you do your homework and really have a good knowledge and understanding of what UNESCO is all about. What's the mandate? What's the mission? What's the vision? And how different is UNESCO, for instance, from other UN agencies? And also research more information about the program areas that you are, related to the position that you are applying for. If it's in communications, dig deeper into what UNESCO is doing, in the communications area, not just in your country, but, overall, so that you just, when you show up, you really know, and it will show. When you are well prepared for the interview, trust me, it will show. So it's really, really good to do your homework and prepare in advance, your good motivation skills. Why are you the best candidate for this job? Why are you applying? Why, why should we hire you? So also just prepare, good motivation and skills replies when we are asking, for instance, tell us a little bit about yourself without necessarily narrating your whole CV. And also think about your strongest accomplishments relevant to the post, and review your CV for examples and demonstrate the relevant and required skills for the post. And you may even want to use certain keywords from the vacancy that you need for the interview, so that at least people almost immediately, by using the same lingo that UNESCO is using, people can immediately match you also, or at least you can make a link between you and the job almost immediately. Moving on to the logistics for online interviews. So UNESCO rarely organizes in-person interviews, and it's even more so relevant in the COVID-19 era, where either we are unable to have meetings or even to travel, because that's a little bit expensive, to travel just for one interview. So we do have online or virtual interviews, and it's really, really important when you are invited for this interview to test your technology before the interview. You can never be too careful. Too often we've seen instances where people waited until the last minute to test the interview. In fact, you could even ask the recruiter to say, hey, can we maybe test the link, or to test how it's done? We will be more than happy to do that, just to ensure that everything goes off without a hitch on the day. Of course, it's important to dress professionally, avoid sitting in front of windows, because what happens, the light will then be reflected and people will probably just see a shadow of yourself. So avoid sitting directly in front of windows or sources of light. Avoid distractors and background noise. Look directly into the camera, and also be aware of your what we call nonverbal communication. Have your poster up, smile, maybe don't frown too much, or just be aware of those nonverbal communication that sometimes we are not necessarily aware of. And don't be afraid. If you haven't had a question, you are more than free to ask the panel to repeat the question if necessary. And also you can write down notes during these interviews. And going back to the competency-based questions, to the extent possible, you use I, meaning really highlight what you did. I did this, and I took this action. I learned this, and as opposed to we, because you really need to highlight your role and accomplishments for each story. So if you use we, oh no, we as a team, again, like I said, it's not the time to be humble. I know it's culturally, some people find it very difficult to use the I did this, but really, to the extent possible, use I and really highlight your role and accomplishments in each different story. And also, it's very important to prepare a question or two to ask the panel at the end. So, very nice question, relevant, so that you have an opportunity to also ask them to flip the coin, if you will, and ask them a couple of questions and maybe for them to clear up a few things. And when we talk about questions, for instance, avoid maybe questions necessarily about salaries and things like this, because as Anik said, we are part of the UN system. The salaries are open secret and they are online. You could Google them. So really use this time to really ask relevant questions that could clear up a few things, either on the programmatic side or the office that you are working, that you are applying into and whatnot. And then a high note, thank them for the time, thank them for having this interview, thank them for, having been selected to that point, and perhaps you can even reiterate your dedication to applying for this post. So really, it's good to end on a high note and leave them with good energy. I will then hand over at this point back to Anik to talk about the Young Professionals Program. Thank you. Anik,
yes. Probably the most heard sentence, in meetings, in online meetings. So we'll end up with Young Professional Program, which is a very important program for us because it has a key objective, which we are, really, fighting for, and that's the diversity, geographical diversity. So it's a program which is only targeting young graduates of younger than 32 from non and underrepresented member states. And I would say in particular from non-resident member states, which is the case of the UAE. The objective is twofold: geographical diversity and ensuring that we have all member states are represented in UNESCO. That is really the goal that we have, and are also normally represented for those who are underrepresented. And of course, rejuvenation, because those are young people coming in and bringing new ideas, innovation to the organization, and we need that. And just on a side, Olivia is one of our former YPP, and so is Jennifer. So we have here two representatives of the YP program. So the YP program has just been launched. We'd have liked to have more positions open. At this stage, we have about 6 or 7. I think we might have more coming through. And we also keep a roster. So whenever positions are available, we may then fill those positions through the YPs who would have been shortlisted. So that's also a possibility. Now, eligibility criteria. Of course, nationals of UAE are eligible, being a non-represented country, 32 years of age, advanced university degree in one of the area related to UNESCO or related to the corporate services that support UNESCO. Language is essential, of course. Excellent knowledge of English or French, and I say English is really a must. I would say if you have only French, I think it's difficult to then move around in the UNESCO career and in the various UNESCO field offices. I think fluent English is really an essential. Of course, French, in addition, is definitely an asset. So knowledge of both languages is always quite desirable, but also knowledge of other UNESCO languages, such as Arabic, of course, which is very important, especially in our programs in the Middle East region. Candidates must apply through their respective national commissions. This is the way the YPP operates in UNESCO. So what is the time frame for the YP program? Well, essentially, the call for applications has now been sent by UNESCO to all national commissions. And then we have until mid-August for the national commissions to come back to us with the candidatures. After that, there is a whole a selection process, because of course there are many applicants, and in the end there are not extremely many opportunities. So there is a thorough selection process, and it starts with video interviews. Video interviews, I'm sure you know how it works. We're sending a link, and then we're asking the candidate to video interview, and then we vision the interview. So that's one way of testing communication skills, essentially, but also motivation, assertiveness. So it's a good way of having a glimpse of the candidate's first basic competencies, and after that, shortlist, panel interviews, and finally the decision, which should happen towards November for an entry in duty as soon as the decision is made. So probably into early 2022, depending on the availability. So that's in a nutshell the description, the outline of the YPP, and I know that the NAC Commission has been very active in trying to attract many applicants, and I think they're very active also in the selection process. So I'm looking forward to our collaboration in this respect. So with further ado, I just want to thank you all for having listened to us. And of course, we are always available for any further information that you may require, that you may need. This is just in a nutshell, an overview of UNESCO's program and recruitment process. But I'm sure there must be very many questions. So I will stop now, share my screen, and let Salma take over. Thank you.
May I come in here, Annick? Yes.
Yes, Jennifer,
yes,
please.
Don't worry. I thank you. I just want to make a few points. I know we don't have too much time, but first of all, it's a wonderful pleasure to be here, and welcome again, students. And as you heard from my colleagues, Annick and Olivia gave you a broad overview, so there's no need for me to repeat what they have said. But I just want to touch on one other talent program that we have. Is the internship. Is another way of coming into the organization. And the internships normally are for 3 to 6 months. And it is necessary to have a master's degree. There's no necessity for working experience, but language skills would be a requirement. That would also be good. And for the moment, it is not remunerated, but UNESCO is actually carrying out a pilot project to study the possibility of maybe remunerating the interns. So this is ongoing. No decision has been made, but we will see what comes out of it. So this is all I want to say, and I won't touch on the other programs because Annick already mentioned it in detail. But I just want to make one point, if I may. Annick mentioned that myself and Olivia, we are former young professionals. And I want to take this opportunity just to say something briefly to you. I came in as a young professional. I'm originally from St. Lucia. It's a tiny island in the Caribbean. Some of you may know of it, maybe not, but UNESCO knew of it. And when I came for this interview 42 years ago, I was the first St. Lucian to come into the organization because we were non-represented. And 42 years later, I'm still so proud to be here. I'm still so proud to have come in through this program. There are many other entry points to UNESCO, but the YPP is different. It's special. Why? Because we are, not to take away from the other programs, of course, but we come in when we are young. So for me, I grew up at UNESCO. I came in here and everything happened to me right here. I evolved, I grew, I developed great skills professionally. And it has just been such a great experience. That doesn't mean it was without challenges. But the beauty of all of this is that because of the way we come in young, We come in to make a career. We come in almost for a lifetime. So we don't normally just come in and leave. The organization invests in us and we invest back in the organization. So there's a certain thing about the mindset of a young professional, at least this is what I have experienced. There's this commitment, there's this drive, there's this sense of perseverance and this sense of keep going no matter what, because it's like a family. It's like we came on a mission. And above all, we come to serve. And 32 years later, that's what brings me to work every morning, the spirit of service. Because we are not here for ourselves. We are here to serve the greater need, the beautiful mandate of the organization, serving the member states, not St. Lucia, but all the member states. And that attitude of service, it keeps you going no matter what happens. When the challenges come, as they do come, you remember why you came and you wake up every morning and you come in to get that job done. Because UNESCO is such a great organization. The mandate is still very relevant, building peace in the minds of men and women. And it's even more relevant today than it was before. And so for me, the experience has been one where that commitment is still there, that sense of service is still there, that feeling of gratitude, because it's a great opportunity. And when the going gets tough and you remember that opportunity that you were given, you keep going and you want to continue giving the best of you. And one more thing I would like to point out without being too long is that experience of the cultural diversity. You know, we have so many different member states, as Anik pointed out. And how do we live with everybody? How do we deal with everybody? Because we're different. But we come together, and by respect for diversity, we learn to work together for the common goal of the organization. And that aspect, among other core values Anik mentioned, is very vital. And for me, again, that is one of the strengths that has made me navigate the organization. If you can work with everybody, regardless of the differences, regardless of the different values we share, regardless of where we come from, we can advance the cause of the organization on behalf of our member states. So the YPP program is not just a job, it's more than a job. It's a commitment, it's a lifetime career with the organization, giving back what the organization has invested in us. So this is what I'd like to say to you very quickly. And 32 years later, I'm still so happy to be here and I'm proud to be part of this organization. And I hope some of you will be becoming part of this organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for that wonderful contribution. It does put things into context from a personal human experience as a YPP candidate who grows into the organization for 30 years. That's amazing. Thank you very much to our colleagues from UNESCO for their informative presentation, which was very useful and very helpful. We will now be going through the questions from the audience, and I also remind those watching that they can continue sharing questions through the YouTube chat. Some of the questions that we've already received are the following. I will ask 3 questions at a time, colleagues, and then maybe we can group them and answer them as a group. The first question was the level of language requirements. Some of them have noticed that the language or the requirement is excellent knowledge, proficient knowledge, and sometimes it's just knowledge. How do you define these levels of language requirements? The second question is, does UNESCO provide support for applications throughout the application process? Is there support to applicants and candidates? And the third question is, does UNESCO provide feedback to applicants about their applications? Those are the 3 questions. Once we've answered them, I'll come back to the rest. Thank you so much.
Sorry, maybe I'll ask Emma to answer the 3 questions. Emma, okay for you? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Anik, and good afternoon to everyone. In terms of your question, so in terms of language requirements, the language requirements do indeed vary dependent on the needs of the post in question. So as you've quite rightly mentioned, we will have different language levels depending on the needs and requirements of a particular post. They could be one language only, sometimes two. Our working languages, as mentioned by Annick, are English and French. And if an excellent level, you'll see on the careers portal that the levels are detailed dependent on the level that we mentioned. So there's excellent, as you said, very good, good, fair, and basic. So those are the levels of the language. Excellent would also entail written and spoken language, so fluency. And as I say, would really depend on the specific needs of the post. If we need a communication specialist who would have to provide written and oral communication in English and French, excellent level would be required for both. In terms of support for applicants, we have a staffing team that is available, a dedicated email address that we can communicate to you, possibly in the chat, we'll write that down. And yes, we are available for support throughout the whole process. Should you encounter any technical difficulties, should you have any queries with regards to your application, then a team of dedicated recruiters is available for you to facilitate and to assist you with any queries or questions that you may have. In terms of feedback, we obviously the basic feedback that's provided would be information. If, for example, you're not successful, then you would receive confirmation of that at the end of a recruitment process. In terms of feedback, should you be interviewed for a position at UNESCO, you are entitled to send an email requesting personalized feedback on your application, which for us is a very important step in terms of helping you to understand why you may not have been successful this time and how to shape your application in future, maybe competencies and skills that would have been or that would be advantageous for you for a future application. I would like to reiterate the points that Olivia made during the presentation. During the presentation on how to shape your application and to really do tailor-made applications for the post, highlighting your skills and competencies that are really in line with the profile of the post. I hope I've answered, and don't hesitate to come back with follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. Those were very helpful clarifications. I'll go to the next round of questions, 3 again. The first question is, what are the credentials normally held by top applicants and employees that are not a prerequisite for hiring? And the second question is, what are common mistakes made by applicants to avoid in both the application and interview process? The third question is, when there is a large pool of candidates with similar backgrounds, what makes a candidate stand out? We'd appreciate your clarifications. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I am not too sure I understood the first question. Sorry.
I'll go back to it. I'll read it and then maybe try to elaborate. I'm reading it again. What are the credentials normally held by top applicants? So basically what makes top applicants successful, okay, that are not a prerequisite for hiring. So we have the job descriptions that tells you what you need, but maybe something makes a candidate successful that's not necessarily in the prerequisite or the requirements for the applications. I hope this is clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So maybe I'll answer the first one, then I probably will ask Olivia to take the second of the common mistakes to avoid. Maybe Emma, the third one, the large pool of similar applicants. So for the first one, as you will see from a vacancy notice, there are the basic requirements and then there are the desirable requirements. And the basic requirements are what is needed to actually get screened for the position. So those are about education, minimum years of experience, knowledge of at least one language, in some case two, but it's usually one. So those are really the basic requirements. So then what if we have applicants who are equally well qualified, then we'll start to look into the desirable. And the desirable, you will see, it's about specificities linked to the job. It can be knowledge of a region, it can be knowledge of a program, it can be an additional language, it can be a specific skill. And those are desirable, they're not required, they're desirable. So those are additional assets. And this is another area of skills and attributes that we will look at. So those are the essential, I think, the credential. Now, of course, at equal competence, we are pursuing geographical diversity and gender parity. So what we would, at equal competence, we will look at our qualified internal applicants. It's important for our internal applicants to move to the ranks we also want to grow our qualified internals. But then we are also looking, when recruiting externally, we're looking at attracting and hiring candidates of and underrepresented countries. So for us, this is really important at equal competence. And of course, gender parity, gender is really important. So those are essentially, but in terms of credentials, I think you are thinking more in terms of attributes. So I would say you have to look into the additional element, what makes it a candidature just not just meeting the basic, but go onto the assets. I think that generally speaking, having an exposure, an international exposure, is always a good, a good attribute. It's something we're looking for. I mean, having international exposure. You can have been in your country, but having worked in an international environment, that is also for us something quite useful for a career. Emma, Olivia, and then Emma. Olivia?
Thank you, Annick. When it comes to the mistakes, perhaps maybe to just reiterate, and I'll start at the application level. There's what we call pre-screening questions, for instance, and this is really what helps us, or the tool. It's an automated process, and for a lot of candidates, and not all of them, but for many, it's really, really important to be careful when you're answering these pre-screening questions, because, like I said, if you click, or if you don't click yes that you've completed this degree of, or if you click the level of the language to be lower than it was this required, or the number of yes to be lower than what it is required, then of course the process or the system will screen you out. But of course, it doesn't mean now you should lie and overstate your accomplishments, but it's just really, really, you need to really pay attention when you are completing this, because it's quite unfortunate when we have very good qualified candidates, and just because they answered one pre-screening question or another, and then they end up being automatically disqualified. Another thing would then be to when we have what we call an employment history form, which you can download on our careers website, and that is what you need to really use and highlight and tailor make your application to this to the specific position. However, we'll find some people, instead of uploading either a CV or that form, they will upload a reference letter, or they will upload their degrees or their diplomas, and at that stage it's not required. So that is then the recruiters are unable to actually match your actual skills and the competencies and the responsibilities that you've done in the past to the relevant or to the position that you have applied for. And also we have what we call questions, for instance, that you will be asked, why are you motivated, or what is your motivation for applying for this post, and what is your career, how does it align with your career goals? And really you need to be detailed as much as possible. Some people just say, oh, I want to work for the UN. Why are you motivated? I want to work for the UN. Okay, and that's like just that. Okay, I want to work for the UN. Okay, and then when it comes to how does it align, for instance, with your careers, it says it aligns perfectly. So you really need to put in the work to actually put together a really, really good submission, so that, you know, like I said, you are applying or competing with thousands of other candidates, and you really just need to you know, show up and really put your best foot forward. And when it comes to the interviews, again, just the lack of preparation, you really just need to apply. Not only does it show when you are not prepared or you don't do your homework, but when you do, it shows and it's really appreciated. So for this, of course, again, doing your homework, and maybe you can even go further as doing mock interviews with a trusted friend or family member who, you know, you can write down a couple of possible interview questions that would be asked during the interviews, and, you know, just do a mock interview for a couple of days. And because what you need to realize is that interview skills can be learned. You know, you don't have to be good at them, but you need to put in the work to actually, you know, be actually good at them. So they can be learned. They are not out of reach for all of us. So just preparing yourself, and the lack of preparation is one of another one. And perhaps, again, when it comes to written assessments, people either not submitting their work on time, or just not understanding the assignment at all. That's why it's really important to just read the instructions very carefully. And yeah, and of course the technology issues, you know, we are very accommodative at UNESCO, so we won't penalize you for not having a camera working or whatnot, but and we are flexible to arrange another time should that happen. But just, you know, prepare yourself and in advance, and try to, at least to the extent possible, you know, mitigate any mishaps that may happen. I don't know if the other colleagues maybe want to come in with other mistakes to avoid at this point, but I'll be happy to stop here. Thank you.
Emma, can you...
Thank you, Olivia. Yes, thank you, Anik. I'll come in on the third question. Just to complete what Olivia said, I think she's really captured all of the main points that are unfortunately common mistakes that we do see in terms of what makes a candidate stand out. Now, as Anik mentioned, we have basic requirements for a post in terms of education, in terms of language, in terms of work experience, and then we have assets. And so really for us as recruiters, we would first ascertain that a candidate meets the basic requirements. We would weigh in any assets, and it's really the to what extent, including languages also, it's to what extent a candidate really meets those requirements and really shines above the rest in terms of how relevant their experience is. International experience, again, as Anik mentioned, a very important point for us, working the ability to work in a multicultural environment, the language skills, both the basic requirements in terms of languages, but then any additional languages that would set a candidate ahead in terms of other applicants, and then the relevance of the professional experience, the extent of the experience, and really the relevance for the position in question. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Jennifer has raised her hand as well. Sorry, Salma. Yes, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Anik. I just want to come back to what Olivia was saying about the interviews. And it is true, from our team, the partnerships, we do a lot of interviews of the junior professional officers. And we have seen a stream of highly qualified, excellent candidates coming in. And what makes the difference is that interview which is so crucial. And we've had cases where we've had really brilliant candidates and it was so difficult to choose. But that candidate selected really, really prepared, really thoroughly. You could see it, you could hear it, you could feel it, learning about the organization, reading the terms of reference, the job description, so that they could tie it into actually their credentials. But going further, sometimes a candidate comes in, they're very well prepared, but you could see it's almost rehearsed. It's not natural, it doesn't flow. So the candidate who flows and who moves through it would be more credible. You could pick it up actually when you come to the different questions. And another error that comes up in the interviews is the way the candidate comes in, the way they sit, the way they position themselves, the way they engage. Some candidates, we've had a couple of cases where a candidate came in with a cup of tea, and during the interview, she drank from the cup. I mean, this was already a deterrent. And when we had the results, she wanted feedback, and we had to unfortunately explain to her she was excellent, but that little part was not good. And she actually learned from it, and she understood that next interview she would do better. So little things like that. It may, sometimes they want to feel relaxed, come in, but they have little attitudes that may really tip the balance. So the interview after you've gone through everything is so vital, so crucial. And adding to a lot of what Olivia said, the preparation, but also the posture, the attitude, the tone, the way you look, the way you communicate with the panel, all these things would also really, really add to the chances. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I think mannerisms and humility is really important in any interview. And a lot of us need to be aware of that in interviews in general, even meetings. So thank you very much for that, Jennifer. So I'll go to the next batch of questions. Again, I'll ask 3 questions and then maybe we'll go back to the others. So the first question is, if an applicant was overqualified for the YPP, are they considered for other positions at UNESCO? I think for me, this adds another question, which is, are there ever overqualified candidates, and how do you define an overqualified candidate for the YPP? The second question is, how long does a staff retain a YPP contract? How long does it last for? The third question is a master's degree required for the YPP position? Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe I'll take these questions since they are related to the YP program. If a candidate is overqualified, I think this happens, in fact, quite rarely. But if ever someone is not retained for the YPs, would he be considered for other positions? Not automatically. He or she would have to apply for another position in UNESCO. So basically, we are looking at the applications to the YP program, and those who are not retained, depending on which stage they reach. Because if they reach the stage of the interview and the shortlisting, but are not part of the final batch, we will maintain them in the roster. But other than that, but that roster would be for YP position, for P1, P2 position. So if someone has a sufficient a number of years to qualify for a P3, for example, then he or she would have to apply for that P3 position. So it's important to keep maybe to keep an eye on the career website and to have automatic alerts to jobs. Now, are we ever overqualified for the YPs? No, I don't think so. As long as you have you enter into the age bracket, you're never overqualified at all. On the contrary, I think that the more you can bring in terms of internships or even work experience, if you have worked, that is always very interesting for us. Now, in terms of the contract, it's a career appointment. So, and I think this is probably unique in the UN system, except maybe in the Secretariat, where you have that that exams for young professionals. But it's a career appointment. So once you're selected as a YP, you will be getting what we all have in UNESCO, a fixed term contract of 2 years. There'll be 1 year probation. That is, what happens with every new hire that we have. And after that, it's a 2 years contract, which is renewable. So this is our career contract in UNESCO. Those are renewable. So it's a career appointment. So you can essentially stay as long as you want. I mean, we basically are happy to keep our YPs because as Jennifer has said and Olivia has said, this is really an important career program for us. But it's always also interesting to move out to other agencies, then come back to UNESCO. I think we're a UN family, and for us, the mobility across the UN is also an important element for us. And finally, MA, yes, an MA is a requirement for the YP program. Actually, it's a requirement for all our P1, P2 positions, for all our professional positions in UNESCO. And I hope I have answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anik. I see Jennifer. Please, Jennifer.
Thank you again. I just want to say, to back up what Anik has said about the overqualified. It is true that there would be no overqualified, but I have an example where that actually happened. And we had a colleague who was selected for the interview way back when I came in. And he was indeed very qualified. He had work experience and and one of the questions the panel asked him was, you seem to be overqualified. Are you going to be able to adapt? And he said yes. But when he got on board, he could not adapt. He could not adjust. And actually, it turned out badly and he ended up having to leave. So coming back to what Anika said, I don't think there's anybody who is overqualified, but what I would add, the attitude coming in is important, because even if you've had work experience more than the other colleagues you're coming in with, you maybe have more breadth, but the attitude you come in with is important, and this is what's going to decide the way you go through. So this is what I'd like to add. Even if you have more, you have worked more, but there's a certain humility that you come in with to grow, because there are things you learn. You don't know everything. So if the candidate coming forward feels that they have a little more than the team they're coming in with, the attitude would be a very decisive factor moving forward and continuing in the organization. I say this just because it actually happened in our time, and it was a bit of a tragedy the way it ended. But if only that colleague had maybe had an attitude of humility, it would have worked out better. So I just needed to see this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Anik, I see you. Do we want to add anything else to this point?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the key quality, in fact, is adaptability, because it's true that moving to a new universe, which is essentially, it's a bureaucracy. We are a UN bureaucracy, so there may be things, especially when when you're young, and if, for example, if you're used to the private sector, it can be a bit rebuffing. I don't know how you say this in English, but so adaptability is a key quality to work in UNESCO or in any other UN agency. But that's normal. It comes with the job, and I think it's a key attribute that one needs to have: adaptability, flexibility. Which I believe usually when you are, you're young, you're starting your career, you're enthusiastic, you're committed. All of these are coming together. But this is indeed, I think Jennifer is right to say it's important. It's important because also after that, you join as a junior staff. After that, you want to look ahead, and that's normal. and of course you have to build your, you have to build your profile to then be able to move ahead. And sometimes it's not so easy. It can be difficult. There are so many opportunities, and this is what's important to keep in mind. But I think it's still an absolutely great career than working for the UN. Thank you. That's all I wanted to add.
From my personal experience, the UN environment is a truly global environment in its staff demographics. So you're really interacting with people from a lot of languages, a lot of backgrounds, a lot of cultures. You have to be very open-minded to be in that kind of environment and accepting. So that's something that any candidate is willing to work in an international environment needs to prepare themselves for. So the next questions, if you allow me, the first one is, how often is the call for the YPP made? For those who just learned about it and would like to prepare for the next round. The second question is, do current students undergoing their master's degree studies and PhD, can they apply for the YPP, and if they get hired, still continue with their studies? So basically, can they be staff and also students at the same time? Will candidates, this is the third question, will candidates who don't meet the age requirement automatically be disqualified from the YPP program? Thank you very much.
Okay, so maybe I'll take this since they are YPs. How often is the call? We used to have calls every biennium. Now, over the past decade, I would say, these have tended to be every 3 years. We would like to ensure there is a call every biennium. And of course, before it was a question of funding, a question of availability position. So it has not been as regular as it used to be. But normally we should have one every biennium. When we're preparing the program and budget, we are then looking at what P1, P2 positions we have, and we're able to retain these positions for the program. So the next round would be then in 2 years, I would say, probably not before that. However, one should always stay on the lookout, because we are also in between the program. We may be advertising P1, P2 positions. So it's important to look at it and to continue watching the website, especially again, candidates from non-represented countries. For us, this is really important. We want to attract such candidates. Can they apply if they have not completed their master? Then we can't actually select them. They need to have an advanced university degree, so they need to have been graduating. But if you're studying towards a PhD, yes, you can continue study. I mean, that is in fact something that you have to discuss with your supervisor, with your manager, saying, I'm still, I have a PhD. Now we know that PhD can be stretched over several years, because if you join UNESCO, you'll be, believe me, I mean, you'll be asked to work quite intensely. This is a very very busy organization. But it doesn't prevent you from continuing to study over, during your assignment. You can even arrange yourself, with the supervisor to liberate a few hours, per week for your studies, for example. This is all, I think, to be discussed and agreed, I think, between the manager and the student. But yes, of course, it's possible, and I think it's even it's quite good actually to continue to study, because then you're bringing knowledge and to the organization. So yes, of course, it's absolutely possible, as long as it's said frankly from the start. I want to continue study. I would like to do this. This is the subject of my PhD, because that's also interesting for us to know what's the subject of your PhD. And if it's in a field which is close to UNESCO, that's quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anik. The next round of questions are, for me, clear, but the very fact that the audience are asking them, I feel like maybe perhaps we should pose them and see what the answers to those are. Because for me, they feel like I personally know the answers, but it would be good to engage in discussions about them. So the first question along those lines is, do you have to be unemployed to be able to apply for the YPP program? Basically, should you not be employed if you're applying for the YPP program? The second question is, how do you use the roster that you mentioned in your presentation? And the third question is, can you be a staff at UNESCO, but also retain your job at home? These are the three questions. Thank you very much.
So maybe I'll take these questions again, but my colleagues, please feel free to step in. No, you don't have to be unemployed. We don't look at what is status. You just so you don't need a particular status. You can be working. You can be studying towards a PhD. You can be interning. You don't need to be unemployed to be eligible for the YP. How do we use the roster? Well, in between YP's campaigns, we may have a P1, P2's positions which are coming up. So what we would do is, when we have these P1, P2 positions, we would look at the roster and see whether there is any qualified candidate who, from the previous exercise, who have been interviewed, were shortlisted, but unfortunately didn't make it to the final round because we have very few seats available. And what we would do is that we would propose that application to the hiring manager, making, this is how we would do. We would say, even before a YP, a P1, P2 position is advertised, we would say, we have someone from the roster. Can you look at his or her profile? Sometimes the manager still wants to advertise. That has happened. Still, the YP candidate was the one selected, which we were very, very happy with. So, and we have from previous exercise, I think we have 3 to 4 YPs who were selected thanks to the roster. So that which is that it's very useful, and for us, all the recruiters are aware that we have this roster, which is valid until the next YP campaign starts, because that may be also one of your questions. So the roster that we have now will basically be replaced by the roster that we will constitute after this YP exercise. Now, can you be a staff, a UNESCO staff and work? No. You need to, your time, I mean, we have a staff rule, like every, UN organizations, we have rules. And one of the rules says that your time has to be at the entire disposition of the Director General. So you cannot keep a paid job at the same time as you are a UNESCO staff member. However, what you can do is take leave from that position. We have staff who were formerly in an administration, in a ministry, and they have taken leave. They are on leave, from that administration. But of course, this needs to be disclosed. We need to know about it. But no, you can't work. You can't have two bosses. In fact, this is it. You can't have two bosses. You have one boss, and that's the Director General of UNESCO. And we have what we call like every UN agency, we have what we call the standards of conduct that basically tells you, as a UN servant, you have only one boss, which is your Director General. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anik, for that response. We have two final questions for UNESCO. I will ask them, and then there is a series of questions for the UAE National Commission. So the first question for UNESCO, do you require standardized language tests during the applications, such as the IELTS, for any applications, be it YPP or general other employment applications? The second question is, how long should the cover letter be? And do you have any advice related to the cover letter for both YPP and general applications? Thank you so much.
Okay, no, we don't have standardized language test, but IELTS, of course, if you see that you have it, obviously it's important to mention it in your application. Basically, the languages are tested at various stages of the application. Well, first, of course, it's a self-declaration. You self-declare what is your level. But then, when we read the application itself, we can already see the written level of an applicant, obviously. So we're looking at, I would say, the pre-screening, pre-selection. When we are reading the application, we can already see what's the level of the applicant. Then, of course, there is the test. If we do a test, we don't always do tests. I think in 50% more or less of our recruitment, we do tests. And these tests are usually tests to verify technical skills, technical knowledge, for example, of a program. So they will usually be administered by the hiring manager. For example, we have a program in culture, on protection, heritage protection. There would be one question on heritage protection, for example, in a specific situation to test the knowledge, but also the way candidates would react to such a situation. So those are really the technical skill tests, and those tests are also used to test language. Because if we have, for example, we are asking for 2 languages, well, that test there will be at least one question in the other language. So we could see the written ability in the languages. That's written, of course. And then oral interview, of course, that this is where we test languages. When we are requiring 2 languages, we will always have at least one question of the interview, which is asked in the second language, even if it's not required. Because if we have an applicant who says, well, I have fair French, we are not going to ask a question in French, but we will ask the candidate, okay, so where did you learn French? How fair is it? We have candidates who underestimate their language knowledge. We have that. We have candidates who say they're fair. And in fact, when you ask them, it's not so fair, it's better than fair. So it's important for us to test that level of language. Of course, languages can also be learned. So if you have fair, languages can be learned. It's not something that's insurmontable, as we would say in French. I don't know how to say it in English. So yes, so that's how we measure a letter, the language. How long should be the letter? I think if it's 1 page, I think it's good, no? Frankly, I think nowadays, cover letter shouldn't be, I think, longer than 1 page. If they are a bit longer, it doesn't matter. But I think 1 page, concise. As Jennifer has mentioned, I think that for us, the sincerity of an application is probably what's the most important. And that comes from a letter that also comes in the interview. And this is something that we can feel. So I would say one page is enough, at least as far as I'm concerned, but I don't know what my other colleagues would say. Thank you. I hope I have answered. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anik. Now I have a few questions that are directed for the UAE National Commission. I'll just answer those briefly before we close the session. The question was, should YPP applications be submitted to UNESCO? No, the YPP applications should be submitted to the UAE National Commission, who will filter them and then submit 15 candidates to UNESCO. And then UNESCO will have to decide based on all the non-represented and underrepresented applications, I think for 6 positions only. So it's just to show you the magnitude of competition for these 6 positions. And if you would like to add on that later, Anik or my colleagues, I'd appreciate that. Does the UNESCO have an office in the UAE? No, the UNESCO does not have an office in the UAE. There are a few regional offices. Having said that, the UAE National Commission is by UNESCO Constitution the focal point between UNESCO and the UAE. So anything between or with UNESCO, we're happy to facilitate, and we're all available to take on these requests. A candidate or a participant had said they applied for the YPP, but still did not get a response. Yes, bear in mind that we are still receiving a lot of applications, and we will respond to everyone in due time. This is a process we will definitely take on soon. Another question came from a candidate who's interested or an audience member who's interested in the YPP program, but is not from the UAE. Unfortunately, the UAE can only receive, the UAE National Commission can only receive applications from UAE national candidates. However, if you're from another nationality, I would advise to reach out to UNESCO or to reach out to your national commission to see if you're from the underrepresented or non-represented groups. I don't know if Anik or Emma or Olivia or Jennifer would like to add to any of these questions, but also I wanted to end by saying thank you so much. We took every single question. I really appreciate it because that's really important, addressing all of the questions addressed to us by the audience. And maybe a question to all of you, if you have any final thoughts or advice to our audience based on your areas of work. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
My colleagues, Olivia, Emma, Jennifer, and maybe I'll end it up. Olivia?
No, I mean, thank you so much. Just thank you to the UAE National Commission for affording us this time to speak to the youth in the UAE, and from one young professional to another, from one person who, I'm the only one representing my country in the UNESCO Secretariat. I just want to let you know that it's doable. It's not, I mean, it can be done. It really can be done, and you're greater than you think. So put your best foot forward, apply. Again, I believe the deadline is still sometime in July. Apply. If I can do it, I believe any of you very young, talented, highly educated colleagues can do it. So please apply, and we look forward to welcoming you in Paris. Thank you.
Emma?
Thank you. Allow me to thank you the Commission and the participants. This was an excellent initiative, very interactive, and we hope to be able to organise more in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you, Anik. Well, this was really, normally we on our side in our team, we normally do outreach to the university, so we do quite a lot, but this was different. And it was really great working with my team and staffing, and thank you so much for having us. And to the students, it has really been a wonderful, just great sharing with you. And for me, what I would like to say in ending, I look back and again, it's been long, but I can see myself coming into that interview. And I just want to say that, I just need to say this. When I applied to UNESCO all those years ago, it was actually my mom who saw the advertisement. And she came to me and she said, Jenny, she calls me, apply. I said, okay, Mom, I'm going to do it. I didn't. She came a second time. She said, Jennifer, did you apply? I said, no, Mom, but I'm going to do it. She came a third time and she said, have you applied? I said, I'm going to do it. I did it. And here I am today. But what I want to say is that my mom, because of literacy, saw that ad. You see, if she hadn't been literate, she couldn't read that ad. Literacy is UNESCO. So I'm here because of so many reasons. And I came to that interview. And as Olivia said, go out there and give the best. Don't be afraid. Prepare that application. Believe in yourself. Take your time, because I took my time. On the third time she said to me, apply, I stayed up late preparing that application. Then I had to be interviewed at the local level. There were hundreds of applicants. I went in, I said, okay. And then I came up on the interview with 2 St. Lucians. There were 2 of us. So again, nothing was done. And here I am. And again, I say it's a wonderful thing. And even if it doesn't work, you try again. Don't give up. Keep believing. And UNESCO is everywhere. UNESCO is not only at UNESCO headquarters. It's not only in the field. It's also in other partners that UNESCO work with. So UNESCO is education, science, culture, communication, social and human sciences. And you can contribute in different ways. For instance, we spoke about the programs. So the YPP is great, but you can contribute to UNESCO in many different ways. So keep believing, keep going. You are young. You have a lifetime ahead of you. Just give your best, and the best will come through eventually. That's what I would like to say. And thank you. And Olivia, it was great being here with you, because we're ahead of you. You will still have a lot of years to go. And it was a good sharing. And we hope that we will see some young ones coming from the UAE.
Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jennifer.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks to all my colleagues. Just as a final word, thank you, Salma. Thank you to the National Committee for this great opportunity for us to present UNESCO careers, to present the Young Professional Program. As all my colleagues have said, we're really looking forward to having you apply. And you see that UNESCO is not just a UN organization with a very, very interesting and challenging mandate, a very modern mandate, especially in these years and in the years to come, but also a very inclusive one. We're caring for people. Well-being of staff is very important for us. And on that note, I will leave you and thank you all again. Thanks.
Dear all, we come to the end of our workshop, and I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the speakers from UNESCO, and a special thanks goes to Asha Kamali from the National Commission and our colleagues from Government Communication for organizing today's session. And to those watching, thank you for attending this workshop. And please do not hesitate to apply for opportunities that match your background and credentials. The Young Professionals Program is open for applications. More details are available in our social media. It is truly our hope to have a UAE talent and many talented Emiratis represented at UNESCO. If you need any further information, our team at the UAE National Commission for Education, Culture and Science stands ready to answer your questions by email. A recording of today's workshop will also remain available at the Ministry of Culture and Youth's YouTube page. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today, and we wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.